I'm Sam.
And this is Gabe.
And this is Coaster Wars.
Alright, ladies and gentlemen, today we have the battle for RMC supremacy. At least, if you ask certain people. This is going to be a good battle, but one of these coasters I am very, very hard on. I'm very negative. I don't want to say negative, but I call it out a lot more than maybe some of the other roller coaster enthusiasts do. Obviously, you disagree with me a little bit because it made your top 15.
Yeah.
But
I think the problem with my coaster is that it got way overhyped. And me and Gabe wrote it, and I'm like, I think another problem with Gabe is that he thinks that there's a better roller coaster at the park, which honestly I agree with. But as a result, he likes to knock on this coaster because so many people do call it like the best coaster in the world and stuff. So, but I think it's matched up with a really good coaster. So this is going to be hard for me to pick.
Yeah, I think if, for your coaster, for what it is, it's still an enjoyable ride experience. I'd probably still rank it in my top 25 at least. But I just don't rank it nearly as high as other people do. But the only way you're going to ever dethrone this coaster is with another RMC, I think. Just because RMC has such an individual and creative ride experience on each of their roller coasters that it's really hard to compete or compare other roller coasters to it. It's just not fair because they already have a structure built, they already have a good idea of what the layout's going to look like before they ever even start building the ride. So they are at a little bit of an advantage that way, too. Plus, they can build extreme roller coasters for a lot cheaper than other ride manufacturers. So that also gives them an advantage. It's hard to compare other coasters to RMCs because of that.
Yeah. I do also want to point out, though, that this is not mine and Gabe's top RMCs. He has one further up in his list, and I have one that is not included on my current list because I have an RMC that I've ridden at Hershey Park that I think is better. So, anyways.
Yeah, we're definitely going to be talking about that coaster, plus another RMC that I'm really passionate about. Later, after we get finished with our top 15s, obviously, we want to get this done. But yeah. Without further ado, I think you're ready to go if you are.
Yep.
All right. In the red corner, standing at a height of 205 feet and reaching a top speed of 74 miles per hour, hailing from the shores of Lake Erie and the RMC gym, it is Steel Vengeance! In the blue corner, standing at a height of 185 feet and reaching a top launch speed of 73 miles per hour, hailing from the hills of Pigeon Forge, Tennessee and the RMC gym, it is Lightning Rod! Let the fight begin. Alright, so the coaster I am bringing to this battle today is Lightning Rod.
And the coaster that I'm bringing is Steel Vengeance.
So, let's talk about Steel Vengeance. Let's get that out of the way. Because I definitely have a lot to say about this roller coaster. But I'll let you go. I'll let you talk about it. Talk about why you like it. Talk about the theming a little bit. Then I'll give my rebuttal to why I don't think it's that great.
Well, okay, just real quick before I get started on this coaster, I think another reason why we knock on this coaster a little bit is the first ride we got on it was absolutely horrendous. And just to make a long story short, me and Gabe were in a bad mood, and we got on this coaster, and we didn't get in the back row, and we rolled that coaster, we were so mad. We're like, what even is that ride? That was so dumb. And we gave it a break. We went and ride some other coasters, got in a better mood, got a back row ride on it. So definitely back row on this coaster. Makes it a much better ride. What I really like about this coaster is definitely that first drop. It's a height of 205 feet, drops 200 feet. It's exactly 90 degrees. You're going straight down. And of course in the back row, RMC is really good at those first drops. Makes it a really, really good first drop. And then when we talk about the elements on this ride, we have an outward banked airtime hill. variant zero G roll, which they call the twisted snake dive. And I had to look up what this is, and it's the train enters a half barrel roll, hangs upside down for a little bit, and then it turns back into the direction of travel. So it's not a full barrel roll, is what it is. And then there's another zero G stall with the break. I can not speak today. The black break run, which leads into two more zero G rolls and an overbanked curve. So this thing is an element, like it's crazy with elements. And then if you like talking about records, this thing broke 10 different records when it was built, which is kind of insane to me, so.
Yeah. So let me just start off by saying before I say anything, like I said, I would still consider this a top 25 ride. I just don't buy into the hype. I don't get this roller coaster. I think there's a lot better RMCs out there that are more creative and have better layouts. The biggest thing about this roller coaster, and this is the word or the saying that I use all the time. I'm sure you've heard other people say it too. When it comes to Steel Vengeance, it's quantity over quality. And that's my really big issue with this roller coaster is, so when you go to Cedar Point, you expect the biggest, the baddest, the fastest, the tallest. Like, you want the best of the best of the best. And for RMC, this roller coaster isn't that. I don't think it's their best. I don't think it's anywhere close to what they can do as their best. And that's my biggest issue with it is they had such a potential with Mean Streak and such a potential with that roller coaster layout, the amount of just structure they had to work off. And this roller coaster just disappoints me, and I feel like a lot of the elements on this roller coaster are subpar. Like I said, they really wanted to hit that 30 seconds of airtime, which is the record they were really trying to get. But I don't know. I don't believe the hype. I don't get it. I don't see this as a number one coaster, and I probably never will.
Yeah, to talk about that airtime on this coaster, it did set the most airtime on a hybrid or any coaster in general at 27.2 seconds, which sounds like a lot of airtime. I mean, it really is a crazy amount of airtime. The problem with Steel Vengeance is that it breaks it up into so many airtime hills. It's like it pops you up for like 0.2 seconds and then it's done. Like, it's not sustained ejector like you might get on El Toro. And so it just like, and then on top of that, with the restraints that you get with RMC trains, you're just banged into that lap bar that's sitting over your legs, which is also another knock that we have to have with this ride. And so I, I honestly would have to go back and get a re-ride on Steel Vengeance to see where it might fall again on my list. I thought it was fun when we rode it, and I do think it is crazy because it is 200 feet, and it does have so many airtime hills, but I don't remember the inversions very well, and I don't know if that's just because I don't remember them because it's been so long, or because they just didn't impact me that much.
Yeah, that's my other biggest issue with this roller coaster is the inversions on this ride are not RMC's best. They aren't. They didn't put a zero G stall on here that I consider a really good element that RMC can do really well. They didn't really do too many wave turns on this roller coaster, which is another RMC element that they really specialize in. And then just a lot of their inversions you go through, and it just doesn't do a whole lot force wise, and it just kind of flips you upside down, and you're like, oh, this is cool, and then the train keeps moving. I just, like I said, RMC element wise has a lot better standout elements. This is what I prefer in a roller coaster. I prefer, when it comes to Steel Vengeance, I prefer maybe a track length of only 5,000 feet instead of 5,740 feet. But I want every element to be a standout, hit you hard element. I want every element to hit like the Outer Bank Airtime Hill does on this roller coaster. That is one thing I will say. The first drop hits you hard, and it is one of the best first drops in the world. And then you get one of the best sustained ejector moments on a roller coaster in that Outer Banks Airtime Hill at like 160 feet in the air or whatever it is. And it just hangs you up there for so long. But then the rest of the coaster just doesn't really do anything for me. I just don't get it. I want, like you said, I want sustained airtime like El Toro. I don't like the back to back to back to back airtime pops for the whole entire roller coaster. And that's really how I view it, and that's how I see it. I like elements that are back to back to back for maybe a section on a roller coaster, but not for the entire ride experience. And that's honestly where I have the biggest issue with this roller coaster.
Yeah, and to talk about the ride that it replaced just a little bit, that Mean Streak, I didn't do too much research on it, but it was a coaster built in 1991, and even though it was getting to get really rough and people were saying that it needed to either be retracked or replaced, it did operate for 25 years before they decided to do something with it. And then to have it RMC'd, I think really is a good way to kind of memorialize this ride, but then also update it for future generations. And unfortunately, I think what happened, like we said before, is this ride got way overhyped. They were trying to really advertise the heck out of this thing and say that it was going to be the greatest ride ever. And they built it, and me and Gabe rode it, and we don't even think it's the best ride in the park.
Yeah, well, back in 2018, I would definitely say this is the best RMC. Hands down, back in 2018, that would be a true statement. It's the best RMC. I still wouldn't call it the best ride at Cedar Point, but it would be the best RMC. But then, since 2018, they have built a few more roller coasters, and they've really shown what they can do to create an ultra elite roller coaster. And that's why, in my opinion, I think this roller coaster falls behind a little bit. Obviously, it was the first, though. That's the one thing you do have to put an asterisk for. It was the first hyper hybrid roller coaster from RMC. And that's something that we do have to talk about, is this was the first. So maybe that's why I don't think it might not necessarily be the best anymore. But yeah, it's still a fun ride experience, don't get me wrong. It's just not for me, I guess. And it's just not my favorite.
Yeah. To talk about those records a little bit, because like Gabe just said, it was the first hyper hybrid, and it really did break a lot of records when it was built. It was the longest IBEX track coaster that RMC had ever built, and it still holds that record, I believe. It was the longest hybrid when it was built, the fastest hybrid when it was built, the tallest hybrid when it was built, the steepest hybrid when it was built. But it also had the fastest airtime. It had the most airtime on a hybrid. But then, something that I didn't think about, so like, all these coasters would be like, oh my god, it broke 15 records when it was built. I was like, how the heck does it break that many records? Well, there's a section of records that it breaks, like, as park records. And so I got into this with this ride, and so what this roller coaster did for Cedar Point, right? I don't even know what park we're at. In terms of park records at Cedar Point, after this ride was built, they had the most steel track in the world at 57,865 feet, the most roller coaster track at 60,423 feet. They had the most rides at one park, but I do want to put an asterisk. This is not the most roller coasters. It is like all of their rides combined. I think the number was like 71 or something. Yeah.
That record's always a little bit of a cheat, because they probably count little flat rides as a roller coaster or ride or amusement ride, whatever you want to call it.
Yes.
So that record's always a little bit cheap, I think, but
they also then had the most roller coasters that were over 200 feet, and they had the most roller coasters in one park with a drop of 90 degrees. So Cedar Point is a park to be reckoned with. Let's just say that.
Oh, for sure, for sure. I think you got to dive into this layout real quick. We haven't really talked about it too much. Or did you do it in the beginning?
I kind of went over the elements. I can go a little bit more into an actual layout of this ride. So you take a 100-degree turn out of the station, and you actually have two little bunny hills before you hit that chain lift hill. But it's a 205 chain lift that then gives you an exact 200-foot drop at 90 degrees, where you reach that top speed of 74 miles per hour. And then it's just airtime hill after airtime hill. We got a small airtime hill, a large airtime hill, but this is that one element that Gabe was talking about, that left outward banked curve which gives you a really good moment of sustained ejector airtime, which leads into another small airtime hill, which leads into that first 0G roll, where we then have an overbanked right curve, a half stall, which is that weird inversion I was talking about. Then you have a small airtime hill, and then you have an up into the block, oh my gosh, an upward left into the block breaks, a sharp left into a steep drop, into an overbanked curve to the left, another small airtime hill, an overbanked curve to the left, an overbanked curve, a 0G roll, a double up, which actually is a little bit unique of a element, into an overbanked left, a final 0G roll, an overbanked left, and then 5 final airtime hills. We were not kidding. We said this thing has, and yeah, that's probably the worst part. It's like me and Gabe said, is none of them are sustained. It pops you up for like 0.2 seconds, and then you're instantly back down, and then it just throws you into another one. And it's like, a lot of people probably haven't ridden this ride, but what it reminds me of is the Zippin' Pippin'. It was a ride that Elvis Presley really liked, and they built, I think, did they build a replica of it at a place in Wisconsin, in Green Bay, Wisconsin, called Baby?
Yeah, they basically bought the design or the blueprints for it, and then they were able to reconstruct it at Bay Beach. But yeah, when you're talking about RMCs, though, that's not the roller coaster you want to be comparing them to. You get what I'm saying? And I struggle with Steel Vengeance. I really do. A lot of people who watch my YouTube channel know I hate this roller coaster, and I like to talk a lot of shit about it. But I have like a legitimate argument here, I think, on why it's not the best roller coaster in the world. I mean, obviously it's an opinion. You can argue however point you want to argue. But you understand what I'm trying to get at with this ride, at least?
I really do, because the point I was trying to make with the Zippin' Pippin' reference is at the very end of this like little kiddie roller coaster, you'd pay like $1 to ride this thing. There's one little pop of air, I guess what you would call ejector airtime at the end of this ride, and it slams you so hard into your restraints. Every single time we come to it, me and Gabe go, brace! Brace! And it is horrible. And like Steel Vengeance is just an entire coaster of that, which is not the most enjoyable.
Yeah, it's that Zippin' Pippin' moment is one of the most violent moments on a roller coaster I've ever experienced.
It really is.
But and that's what this roller coaster is it's just so violent. Like, I like when a roller coaster wants to throw you around and give you some really good forces and do it creatively in different ways, maybe upside down or, some laterals, whatever. But I feel like this roller coaster is just violent, but in a bad way, not a good way. You know what I mean? I can't get past that kind of ride experience, and that's why it will never break my top 15. Like I said, it'll never be a number 1 for me.
Oh yeah, and I feel like for a good roller coaster, like you said, they can be really intense and have a lot of forces, but I also feel like there should be a level of re-rideability. Oh my gosh, I cannot talk to it. I'm cutting this out. Re-rideability in there that allows you to really ride the coaster a couple times and really like figure out the elements and feel the elements and see where the best seat is on the ride. And like we can compare it to, I don't know, something like Maverick in the park. Me and Gabe really like that ride, and we rode that thing like 3 times in a row, I swear. And that thing is a very intense ride, but you can ride it 4 times in a row, and it's awesome.
Yeah, like I said, this roller coaster just isn't my favorite, and that's what it comes down to. I'm sure if I get a re-ride on it, maybe my opinion will change, but I really doubt it. I just don't see that happening. But with that, we're already over 20 minutes, so we got to transition here. We're going to go way over.
Oh, I know.
So, transitioning over to Lightning Rod, a completely different ride experience from RMC. Something that no longer exists, so I don't know if you know this or not.
I do! I saw the article today, and I'm like, dang it! But I'm also really glad that we got a ride on it, but continue, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so they shut the ride down this fall. It's not going to be open for their Christmas events and stuff like that. and they're taking out the launched lift hill.
Yes.
It is a sad end to a roller coaster with kind of a sad history, let's be honest.
Yeah.
Um, it was just so unreliable. I am one of the lucky people on planet Earth that every time I've gone to Dollywood, Lightning Rod was open for the entire day, which there is a lot of people that have been to this park that cannot say that. So, it's just, it'll be a lot more reliable. But they're also taking one of the best features out of the roller coaster. But we can definitely talk about it and talk this ride up a little bit. So,
Yeah. Let's talk about what this ride originally was built as, and that was a wooden launch roller coaster. It was the first of its kind. It was the only of its kind. It was an RMC steel topper track, so not the traditional wooden coaster, but still a wooden roller coaster, and it launched you up its hill from 0 to 45 miles per hour. And what happened between to kind of go over a brief history of this ride, in the 2020 to 2021 season was several thousand feet of the track were replaced with their RMC's patented iBox track, and so they then had to convert the name of this ride to, it was then a hybrid. And then, like Gabe said, now they're now taking out that launch and putting in an accelerated lift or chain lift hill, and that was due to reliability issues on that coaster. As you kind of heard Gabe hint at, a lot of times people would go to this park just to ride this roller coaster, and they couldn't get a ride on it. It would be closed all day. He was lucky enough to be able to go there multiple times and get rides on it, and I was also lucky enough, the one day that I did go, it was open, and I was able to get multiple rides on it, including an amazing last ride that I will let Gabe talk about.
yeah, so one thing I would like to talk about a little bit is that accelerated lift hill that they plan to put on this ride. I don't know exactly how it's going to work, but it sounds like the goal for the lift hill is to have it at the same speed that you would be carrying when you crest the top of the launch lift hill.
Okay.
So it's not going to take away from any of the ride experience after the lift hill is the goal. It's still going to run the same speed. It's still going to have to run with the same forces. You're just going to lose that initial launch at the bottom of the lift hill, obviously, which is unfortunate. Because it's one of my favorite parts of the roller coaster is that launch. But yeah, so I've gotten multiple rides on this. This is a roller coaster that has moved around a lot in my rankings. My first time ever at the amusement park, I was incredibly disappointed. I was not happy with this roller coaster at all. I thought it was running really poorly. It just when I was there the first time, I got multiple rides on it, but it did break down several times throughout the day, and I don't think it ever reached its full potential. I don't think it ever fully got warmed up. Very rarely did I ride it with a full train as well. So that was some of the issues. But me and you, when we went back to the park, I said, we gotta go back and ride Lightning Rod, because it was still fun. We got one ride, was it one or two rides? I think it was actually two rides, at the very end of the night. So we rode every roller coaster in the park, and it was about 8:30, 9 o'clock, or 8:30, 9 o'clock, and we were heading towards closing time. It was their Christmas event, so they closed a little bit earlier, I think. And they ended up extending the ride night by an hour because of how busy it was. And we're like, let's just go ride Lightning Rod like a bunch of times.
Oh, yeah.
So me and you ran down there, and then we rode it once, and we were just blown away by it. And then we got our father on it as well, and we got the last ride of the night, basically.
Well,
and I swear to God,
to a little caveat in there, didn't it break down when we were in line and we're like, oh no, and we were kind of just waiting, and we're like, you know what, we'll just stay here and either we'll get another ride on it or we'll just walk out of the park, and then it reopened. We're like, yes.
Yeah, it was like a roller coaster of events to ride this roller coaster. Yeah, it was one of those things where we were just like, come on, let's get one more ride, and we got it. And it was one of the best roller coaster experiences I've ever had. Obviously, with family, that makes it even better. But it was just so much fun. I love this roller coaster from start to finish. And it's definitely one of my all-time favorites. Let's go ahead and dive right into this layout quick. So you have a turn out of the station, and you roll across a road on the track, and that's where you hit the launch section. So a majority of this launch is at the bottom of the lift hill. So it's actually a very short acceleration time period to get you from about 4 miles an hour to, like you said, 45. So you get a really good kick. And after that initial kick, you start to lose speed at the very top where the launch stops, and you crest over a pre-drop. Probably, if I had to guess, it's almost 15, 16 miles an hour. You are moving still at the top of this launch. And that's where you drop down into a dip before the initial first drop, which is 185 feet in the air. It drops about 165 feet down into the valley below. The one thing to mention about this roller coaster, it is a terrain layout. So even though it goes up and down, out in Dollywood, it's very, very hilly. So they really use the terrain to their advantage. So a lot of the structures don't look that tall, but they really are because they're built on the side of the hill. So after the first pull out, you pull up into one of my favorite moments on the ride. It is a sustained ejector moment wave turn, and you dive down and you turn back the other way, and you enter into a twist and shout element. So basically what this element is you are turning to the right as you are going up in the air, and then once you hit a certain point, the banking on the track flips 180 degrees and gives you a really good dose of airtime, and then it flips you back 90 degrees and into another turn. So it's a really whippy, really good transition moment before hitting a outer banked airtime hill, similar to the one on Steel Vengeance, just a little bit smaller, but still sustained ejector airtime before popping up into a double up. So this is the double up moment as you're climbing up over the top of the hill. And as you crest the second part of the double up, that is the best airtime ejector moment on the entire roller coaster. It is sustained before heading into something that I can only say once, and there's no way to describe it, so I'm just going to say it. It is a quad down. So it is 4 separate sections of drops that take you down to the bottom of the hill by the station. It's a great back-to-back-to-back moment. This is where I talk about I like those moments, but when they're shorter, and that's why I like it so much. You pop up into one more speed airtime hill and a overbank turn that pops you up into the air, turns you around towards the station, and you hit the final brakes. Definitely a really, really good layout. Let's hear your opinion on it too. I feel like I've been talking a lot.
I was going to say we need to talk about this quad down because it is my favorite moment on this ride. I love it. Every single time we would go over it, I would count the hills. I would just scream out 1, 2, and 3, and as we're going over these hills. And so like Gabe said, this roller coaster is built into the hills of Tennessee, and it really utilizes that. And this quad down is really cool because you're coming back towards the station, which means you're coming back towards the park. So at the beginning of this, the very first of the quad, you get actually a really good view of the park and stuff, but of course you don't get very much time to look around because the next thing you know, you're being shoved down 4 separate hills. And also an advantage of being on that hill is it's able to do that because it's going literally down the hill back to the station. So it's a really great moment. And something also I'd like to point out is that they are not just straight down. So the first 2 are, but in between that second and third and then third and fourth, there's a little bit of banking before you get to the hill, which makes it even more unique. It's an amazing part of this roller coaster, and I love it.
Yeah, for sure. That quad down is awesome. But this is my point behind RMC. That I was getting behind with Steel Vengeance. Is that I said I want every element to be a standout element instead of just a repetitive over and over again roller coaster. And that's really what this ride is the epitome of. Because you have the wave turn, a standout awesome element. You have the twist and shout element, which is a standout, awesome, just incredible moment. And then you have the Outer Banked Airtime Hill, which is another standout, incredible moment. And then you have the double up, which is probably the one smaller, duller spot on the ride, but it's still a really good moment. And then you have the quad down going down the hill, which is one of the best moments on any roller coaster. And that's what I really like, is I like standout elements for each element. I want better elements instead of more. And that's the epitome of Lightning Rod, and also why I don't like Steel Vengeance as much.
Oh, yeah. With that, we have reached the end of our time here. We got to get into which we're going to choose. And unfortunately, from the way me and Gabe talk, I think we all know what we're both going to pick. And my pick is Lightning Rod on this one.
Yep. Say it up. Oh, we're going to say it on 3.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You totally ruined it. You ruined it.
I'm sorry.
Man.
I didn't know you were planning that. I apologize.
Yes, I was.
That is such.
Yes, my pick will also be Lightning Rod on this one. I like the launch, which obviously no longer exists. But I just like standout elements. I like this roller coaster better over Steel Vengeance. I have my issues with Steel Vengeance, and I'm going to continue to talk a lot of shit about that roller coaster just because it pisses people off, and I enjoy that part of it too. But if I'm being honest,
yeah, with Lightning Rod for me, it's the combination of the terrain coaster, and it really is better elements. It's more sustained ejector time instead of those really short pops of it. And I mean, the only really complaint that I ever had about Lightning Rod was just its reliability, which, I mean, honestly, if you think about it, can happen with a lot of launch coasters. And something else that just I'm gonna talk about really quick before we run out of time is I also really like the theme park that it's at, which Dollywood is not geared towards roller coasters, so they only have a couple selections there, but it's a really beautiful park, and we had the great opportunity to go during the opening weekend of their holiday, like, extravaganza, and so the whole park was decorated with Christmas lights. It was absolutely gorgeous. I'd never enjoyed walking between coasters so much in my life.
hey guys, you want to notice something funny? You could tell we're getting higher up on our lists because you're actually talking about the roller coasters instead of just the theming.
I'm sorry. No. Well, you know what? I'll give you guys a hint. It's still there with Lightning Rod because that's actually got really cool themes. It's 90s, 50s, and it's Jukebox Junction, but I won't get into it here.
Yeah, it definitely does have a really good theming to the roller coaster. We just didn't talk about it. That's why I had to say it. But with that, this was a good episode. Like I said, I have my issues with Steel Vengeance. I'm always going to. But I always feel like I have a legitimate reason for them. I just don't do it for clicks. Like I said, I have a legitimate hatred for it. and reasons why I don't like it. But with that, next week we're going to be transitioning into another really interesting battle. We're calling this one David versus Goliath, Part 2. So, 2 different roller coasters, similar, but one is definitely a lot taller than the other one. So I think the name's fitting for sure. Definitely going to be another interesting battle. Two roller coasters we've already talked about, though, which will be interesting.
So, but yeah, join us next week for David versus Goliath Part 2.